They did it. Moonshot did it. Kimi K3 is out there. They dropped the open weights today, and it's big. It's really big. China just gave away what American AI labs charge a premium to access, which is a frontier model, not an API, but the full weights. Kimi K3 can go toe to toe with Claude Fable 5, GPT 5.6 Soul, and do some serious agentic work. Interestingly, it even answered me directly about the Tiananmen Square uh, issue. And if you know anything about that, then a Chinese model giving us that answer is a very interesting piece of information. I did not expect that from a Chinese AI company. But free does come with an enormous catch. Running it the way Moonshot's the company that created Kimi K3, the way they recommend it will cost you about $4 million and something like a massive rack with 64 tightly connected accelerators. That's what they recommend. It's 1.65 terabytes of data. So you're going to want to run this on a big, beefy network storage device that's going to need super fast connection to the silicon and all that sort of stuff. So it's not just something you can drop on your laptop. Not at all. Probably not even if you had a dozen, uh, 2 dozen massive devices here locally. No way. So did it open source AI just win? Or did Kimi expose that model weights were never the real moat? Because if the moat has moved, some of the biggest winners and losers in AI are not who everybody thinks on Wall Street is going to win. And that's what we are here to do. Figure out where we are exactly in this AI bubble. We're in a bubble. We're absolutely in a bubble. We need it to be a bubble. That's how we know that this thing is moving forward and this is going to take over the world, be life changing. And it already has been. But much like a railroad, much like electricity, much like the internet, if you're not in a bubble, it's not a real technology. So we are definitely in that bubble. We just want to see where we are in that. Are we in the middle? Are we at the end? Are we still at the very beginning? We want to know. We won't want to be the last person holding the bag. We want to be in the game, right? So that's what we're doing. Let's dig into it. Okay, is Frontier now free? That's basically what we're talking about here. Okay. Um, yes, it is. Yes, you can go and download this model for free on Hugging Face. It'll cost you whatever the download speed would be to download it. You can do that. Absolutely, you can do that. But again, it's 1.56 terabytes, and you need to run it on 64 plus accelerator supernode. Some details about Kimi K3, 2.78 trillion total parameters, 104.2 billion active per token, million context tokens, and again, 64 accelerators. So the open source guy, and look, there's a huge amount of debate going on right now. Uh, Everybody and Anthropic is everybody is saying, hey, we need open source. We need a Jensen Huang of NVIDIA saying, hey, we need open source. Microsoft, Meta, even Apple probably came out saying, hey, yeah, we need open source out in the world. And Anthropic is saying, no, it's not safe. It's not, we're exposing the world to, nuclear, biological, chemical, radiation, whatever, CBRN, however you say it. We used to call it NBC. Um, Disaster. We're exposing the world. And all you're doing by making this open source is giving tools to the attackers. And the reality is you're actually giving the defenders, you and me, the people who, have open source stuff and have this stuff going on, or, run real legitimate stuff that would be attacked. We can't. And we saw that with OpenAI and the Hugging Face thing, where they were running their system on Hugging Face to look for security exploits, and in essence, uh, both Claude and ChatGPT uh, got attacked, and they attacked the benchmark. They cheated. They broke out. They went out, got on the internet, and did tried to win the game. And Hugging Face tried to use Open OpenAI, ChatGPT, and Claude to defend against it, and they couldn't, and they had to actually go out to an open source Chinese model to solve the problem. So that's kind of the big argument that everybody's worried about, and that happened over the last week. Um, so we have the open source camp. Their argument is the weights are downloadable, capability monopolies are getting shorter. Sovereigns, clouds, labs, and large enterprises can inspect, modify, and host frontier adjacent intelligence without waiting for a US lab. This is what Kimi K3 showed us with their release week and a half ago, 10 days ago, and then today with their open source their open source release. The closed camp, which is mostly Anthropic, OpenAI did sign the document. If you've seen the document floating around saying we believe in open source, uh, weights are not a product. Anthropic and OpenAI still own reliability, inference, efficiency, enterprise, distribution, agent harnesses, compliance support, and one-click availability. For sure, they do. That's not really what they're trying to get. They're looking for regulatory capture so that they can fight off any competition to their financial models, to their moat, and be the HAL 2000 of we're the ones who can control what you can do, whereas the in essence the rest of the world would have access to open source if this there's been some talk of regulation coming out of the U.S. administration, which to ban Chinese and open source models. If that's the case, then we are stuck with the best frontier models doing our work for us, which in a game theory sense is that basically says, okay, United States, you're we're in the United States, you're only allowed to use these models, however they decide to regulate it, a number of ways that we could probably dig into. Um, but if they do get that, then the next thing that these labs will be doing is going to Uncle Sugar, U.S. government, and saying, well, we aren't making as much, we're not competitive enough, and we can't get enough money anymore because we're no longer allowed to be worldwide. So we need you to subsidize us. We need you to, like come in and maybe even just make us part of your government and just like we're the government now, sort of thing. That old meme. I'm the I'm the captain. Yeah, I'm the captain now. So, current verdict as of today, Monday, July 27th, when Kimi K3 dropped their model weights. The current belief is that open source AI won the model access war. It has not won the product or deployment war, that's for sure. The moat didn't disappear. It moved from owning the intelligence to serving it reliably and embedding it in workflow. So, thinking about that, what does that do? Where does that move us? That means you can continue to pay OpenAI or Anthropic or whoever to provide just the chat window or the connection string to your code base or whatever, and just go right to work. And they'll handle the servers, they'll handle the power, they'll handle the infrastructure, they'll handle it all for you, which is one of the big advertisements of cloud, right? And the benefit of it, of course, we saw over the weekend a bunch of Claude artifacts were released and indexable through Google. So not exactly secure in a number of ways. And we've seen these companies create products to compete with their clients. And so having an option in open weights, open source models gives us the ability to at least control our own future. K3 entered the frontier band. It did not take the crown. It is not better than what's out there. It's just that it is an option now. You can run your own $4 million instance of Kimi K3 locally and get the similar type of results that you would get from a Fable, maybe Mythos of GPT 5.6. So you're not giving up anything in the sense that of performance, but you're getting security. Now, Opus 5 just came out Friday. So now, okay, Kimi K3 is as good as, let's take a look here. what is the comparison? So Kimi K3 is the leading downloadable frontier agent model. That's great. You get access to full weights, long horizon coding, research, open deployment. It does require a lot to run it. Okay, here's the thing. Claude Opus 4.5 was released on Friday, Anthropic's practical daily frontier. Only access to it is to just pay Anthropic to use it, or whatever API provider. Best case verification, coding, knowledge work. It's pretty good. It's great. It seems to be different than Opus 4.8. So the 5, the new level, the new model, it seems to be better. I still use 4.8 for a number of things too, and Fable. So it's closed system, policy and platform dependent. But look, when Kimi K3 came out 10 days ago, it was as good as 4.8, arguably as good as Fable 5. Now, 7 days after Kimi K3 comes out, Opus 5 comes out. So next, GPT-6, GPT 5.7, is how are they going to compare to Kimi K3? So you go out and you spend $4 million per cluster here to run Kimi K3, only to have um, your lead on the frontier be wiped away by a dot release. How's it compare to Fable 5? Fable 5 is the highest end long horizon Anthropic tier. It's managed with a fallback. Hardest multi-day coding and knowledge work. Like if you got the tokens, you can say, hey, go build Excel for me from scratch, make it work exactly like Excel. And it'll just do it until it's done. Now, 5 days maybe. I don't know how long it takes to build Excel. And I'm talking with pivot tables, and I'm talking with like the Python integration, like all the different things that you could do. I don't know. It may take a couple of days, might take a week. But the thing about Fable is it'll keep going. It'll keep doing it. It's expensive. It's about $10 per million input and $50 per million output, and stores your information for 30 days. Mythos 5, so that's Fable. Um, Mythos 5, it's controlled cyber and biological frontier. It is restricted access, um, offensive cyber and specialized science. So it's kind of its own unique case and not a general consumer product. So you basically have to be friends with Anthropic to get this. And, that means that you got to be in their world. GPT 5.6 Soul, OpenAI's high-end general. It's managed only, regional encoding, no weights, economic domain. So it's all the same. Kimi K3 is the only thing that's open. Um, Across the board, you can see Kimi K3 on. So this is some benchmarks. I grabbed a handful of them. I believe that's the color white. The top one is K3. Middle is Claude Anthropic's Fable, and the bottom one is ChatGPT Soul. So you can see GPT Soul is terminal bench wins there. Um, Frontier Sui, Fable wins there. Sui Marathon, K3 wins, and Browse Comp K3 narrowly wins. So what you say what you want about it, they're all neck and neck, right? It looks like on Frontier Sui, um, GPT-5 is kind of bringing up the rear. In every instance, you can see that K3 is pretty much within the top and certainly top three. So it's confirmed. The weights are public. That hit today. Hugging Face repository is ungated and contains a release checkpoint. So you can go Hugging Face right now and see it. As of the recording here, there was about 2,850 downloads. I don't know. Been out for 6 hours. I don't know if that's a lot or not. um, let's see. Open weights, data center deployment. Sparse activation reduces arithmetic, but the full export pool, routing traffic, cache state, and serving stack still have to live somewhere, right? And so, like I said, you're probably not going to string together, like a dozen Mac Studios. Like, I don't know how many it would, I don't know, 72 Mac Studios to run this locally. Like, I don't think it's something you could do. I actually didn't do the math on that one. I should. But I know that you would need a GB300 rack with 72 Vera Rubins in it to run Kimi K3. So this is not attainable by a lot of people. Even if you had $4 million to go build this, are you able to get that, 72 Vera Rubin GB300 GPUs and the full thing to run this in your data center? So there's still that issue. This is just basically saying it's possible. If you actually have that and you're sitting around and you're like, you know what? I hate those guys. I want open source. You could do that right away. So if you have the power, you could run it right away. And certainly that's how you are able to, or I've been able to play with Kimi K3 in the wild is through API, through some open token providers. Basically, they host all the models for you, and you just pay in tokens. Open Router, Venice. There's a number of different. I think Fireworks. There's a number of different providers where you can just like give them your. I think Grok, GROQ. You can just swipe your credit card and or put a credit card on file, and they'll you can just hit the API and it'll run it. So the architecture map, mildly interesting. Kind of the different types of weights and activations, some of the different ways. We don't need to get into it. An interesting thing is the reasoning model is always on. Um, that's by default, it's always on. The thing about Kimi K3 is that what makes it interesting is it's a mixture of experts. So it's not just like one model. It uses a bunch of different models together to come up with it. So that's not new, but that's just how they were able to do it. Um, Again, here's the math on running it. It takes, according to Moonshot AI, is the company that owns, that released Kimi K3. They're running it. Um, they recommend tightly connected supernode, um, 64 consumer GPUs. The practical closet fit is a rack scale system with enough high bandwidth memory, fabric, storage, power, and liquid cooling to serve the full checkpoint properly. The math on this again, they're GB200s, okay, Blackwells. I'm sorry, Blackwells, not Vera Rubins. Um, GB200 NVL 72 Classic rack will cost you about $3 million to $3.5 million to purchase and receive. Then you're putting in a couple $100,000 in storage. Again, 1.5 terabits is um, it's a big that's a big device, and it has to be fast. It has to be like super accessible. It can't just be like an old hard drive. Like you have to have really fast. It has to be connected to very high bandwidth networking and routing and switching through the devices. Um, so that's kind of a tricky one too. Again, you're going to want power distribution, liquid cooling. That can cost up to $1 million to get that done. And then yeah, you got to put the order in. You got to get it shipped. You got to get, it's dropped off in the data center, unboxed, put in the rack, cable management, wiring, put it all together, make sure it's all working, troubleshoot everything, install the software, update software, fix things that are missing in there and things that might have broke along the route and get your warranties and your things shipped back and it's just a bunch of stuff. And then, put it all together, and get walked through. You may have to get a FDE, forward deployed engineer team to come out and help install this and get it up and running. And then, of course, taxes on the thing too. So again, probably looking more like a $5 million startup costs, and then total like probably upwards of $8 million to run it over the course of 3 years, which depreciates. Pretty pretty interesting. For nearly everyone, Moonshot's hosted API is dramatically cheaper. Buying the rack only gets to make sense when complete data control, model modification, sustained high utilization, silvering. So, like, if you really need to have it on prem and you really need to do it, this is the model. The thing about this is, by the way, if you're going to do this on your own, if you're going to get into on-prem storage, running your own models, I mean, like that, you're going to spend this anyway. So, or you're going to work up to spending this. What was here? Lens shots. Okay, that was an interesting image. Why is it not showing here? Let's go to X and we can see the hopefully we can see it. And let's go to uh whoops, Voorhees. Is that right? Eric Voorhees. He's the one that ran this query. Here we go. In case you're wondering, here it is. Tiananmen Square protest. So he asked Kimi K3, tell me more about Tiananmen Square protests. I thought this was interesting. I wanted to include it in here. Sorry, it took me a second to pull that up on my screen, but hey, the internet. Um, in April 1999, the death of this gentleman, apologies, a reformist Communist Party leader who had been purged for being too sympathetic to political liberalization, sparked gatherings of students in Beijing's Tiananmen Square, mourning for who quickly evolved into broader protests. Students and later workers and ordinary citizens demanded. So all I'm pointing out here is Kimi K3 historically this violates Chinese censorship policy, and it even explains the events are heavily censored in mainland China. Refers to June 4th, 1989, Tank Man, or even oblique terms like May 35th are scrubbed from Chinese internet. Candlelight vigils held. So in essence, this is an interesting thing, and I bring all this up because it's not normal that a Chinese model would answer that question and in English. Okay, usually it's blocked. Um, why is that interesting? Because it's a Chinese model, and they should probably get a knock on the door from the Chinese government saying take it down. Who knows what that was? Maybe an oversight. But think about it. They released Kimi K3 was released 10 days ago. Open weights were released today, 10 days later. So theoretically, you would think that the CCP, Chinese Communist Party, would have a chance to review it in that period of time before releasing the open weights. But there it is. Okay. The old question is almost obsolete, right? No longer with an open model can get close. It's there. How close is enough? Look, if you are running a business and you're worried about um, the, in fact, this is interesting, right? If you're worried about OpenAI, Anthropic taking your IP, taking your code base, taking your internal knowledge and using it for themselves, this is the antidote to that. Self-hosting on-prem or in a location that you control, even if you're using um, it on a cloud provider like GCP or something like that. At least you can lock down what is given away. You can't do that if you're using OpenAI or Anthropic's infrastructure. And so the question is, and the everybody's like, well, it's a Chinese model, and what's the back door to that? What is can't they sneak it in? The the thing is with the open weights, you have it. That's the source code, man. That's the secret sauce. That's the stuff that if you're using open source and you don't have the open weights, you're questionably using, there could be. With the open source or the open weights, it's now you can control what's seen. You can hide it. You can see if it's being snuck to China or not, because now you actually have everything on your own device. You can put it in your own device, not give it access to the internet, and then just watch it and see if it jailbreaks itself to the internet, right? Um, so that's the issue, right? one of the big things, there's a big discussion right now about the government looking to regulate the open source models and not. And that's another discussion, but uh, it's out, it's here, it's available. The interesting point is again that the Tiananmen Square, the actual the censored information is wide open. So you got to wonder what's the play here? Is that actually an oversight? Was that put on purpose? Is that kind of like a Trojan horse into getting everybody to be like, well, they have the hidden stuff, it's wide out in the open, so maybe they're safe, and maybe it's for another reason. Um, this is where we get to our big economic thesis. Can the model be free while the machine gets scarcer? Think about this. Linux is a free server software, desktop software, free operating system, right? It was offered for free. Everybody still bought Windows. Everybody still runs Windows. Everybody still bought Macs. Everybody still runs Mac OS while Linux exists in the world. And so it's not that it removes it, because the best researchers with the most money in the world are staying at, or theoretically staying at these big AI companies, because they get access. The models we see right now, as of today, are probably not the models that they're using in-house to train their next model. They probably are running 5 point Fable or Mythos 5.5 to train 5.1 and 5.2 and all those different models, right? And so if you work there, you probably have access to some of the best stuff that nobody else gets ahead of time. It's a big, exciting reason to work there. Also, I know a number of people who get access to these models before the public release, because they got to be tested. You can test them in house as much as you want, but you got to give them out to the knuckleheads to let them go and bang on them and break them. And I do a number of work myself with a couple of how many are there, Chris? With a frontier lab to do that. So I'm given access, and I'm out there using it, and I'm being compensated to break them, to document them, to do work on them, to try these new features and all that sort of stuff. Um, a lot of people, they do that with a lot of people because we're going to give them a unique, um, and sometimes like not a fanboy reply, right? Right now, if I'm getting access to cloud stuff, I'm not fanboying it. Going to play with it. I'm going to see what it is and everything, but I'm not fanboying what's going on right now with a lot of things they're doing. So, and they're aware of that. Like I don't hide it from them that I'm angry or I'm bothered by their stuff, but I still get access to maybe them or some other lab, uh, and I still use it, and I still provide that feedback, as do a number of people. So thinking about what the economy, what this investment thing is like, where are we going to start focusing with this new information? I think infrastructure volume is going to tick up based on agentic inference. That means all these models are basically agentic harnesses. They run agents. They send out a bunch of agents to do a bunch of work. And so that is very intensive on high bandwidth memory, HBM, DRAM, rack scale networking, storage, movement, power, networking, right? That's our thesis. We still believe, and this just keeps showing that every step of the way, as earnings go through, we've learned that high bandwidth memory and just memory generally, networking, storage, and power is the current thing that everybody's trying to deal with, because in essence, agents are just demanding more of it and more. Just think of, if you added, I don't know how many billions of people are on the internet right now. It's a couple billion of the whole world, right? But there's more agents than the entire population of the world on the internet right now. Last I heard a couple weeks ago, it was like 5 times the amount of users are agents now. So what we think What we've moved now that we've seen the models, now that we've seen a couple, Google's earnings and IBM's earnings and Intel and everything, what we've seen, commodity API margins are dropping. Model access premiums are dropping. They're if I can host this, I don't need to pay for the API anymore. If I can run it on my own, I don't need to pay for whatever, you know, um, Claude or whatever. Um, I don't need to run the newest GPUs. This is something we started to see too. When you look at how Kimi K3 it was built not on the Vera Rubins or the Blackwells. It was built and trained using, sure, they had some of that, but theoretically, it was used with a lot of Huawei devices, with non-band GPUs, pre-band GPUs that they all had. So it's when you look at what they used to train Kimi K3 and to get it to the Mythos and GPT 5.6 Soul level, they did it without all the firepower that they used to create Mythos and GPT 5.6. So what does that say? It's less about the actual GPUs and the models and everything like that to build and create these new things. It can be done in other ways. And the argument was that it was distilled. Of course, it was distilled. Every model we touch is distilled from another model. That's a fake. That's a fake thing. It's not real. This distillation is the same. If you were in business, distillation, basically you're going out and saying like, okay, what's the market like? What's the, um, what would be like call up your competitor and be like, hey, I need to buy a new roof, get a new roof for my house. This is 1,000 square feet, whatever, pitch, blah, blah, blah. This is what I need. These things, whatever. You give them the information. Your competitor is going to give you a quote. And if you are another roofer, you just distilled information. You just figured out what their pricing model is or how, the products they're using or things like that. It happens all the time in the market, in business. It's just what you do. So this boogeyman of distillation attacks is a as old as business has, as long as business or man has been competing with another man, or a human has been competing with another human, animals competing with animals. It exists. It's not going away. Okay. Um, we think that the devaluation of GPUs and replacement rate of GPUs is probably not going to be um, as concerning as it has been in the past. And realizing that AMD is going to be innovating, Intel is going to be innovating, Samsung is going to be innovating, Huawei is going to be innovating, Nvidia is going to be innovating. They're going to be doing that. There's going to be new competitors coming out. That's what happens when somebody has amazing margins. People are like, "That's worth my time," and they're going to go after it. And so there's going to be a demand for the newest, greatest, amazing thing. There's also going to be a demand to do it more elegantly, to do it more thoughtfully, to do it better, to try innovative ways like Kimi K3 did with theirs. They didn't have the big firepower that OpenAI and Anthropic use and XAI. They don't have all that firepower, so they have to use different tools and they have to do it smarter. So that just opens up the world for a lot of competitors to suddenly say, actually, we can compete on the frontier model that we were not competing at before. Maybe that's why Grok is back in the game. Maybe that's why there's, new competitors stepping up because it doesn't appear that the model is the has the moat that it used to have. Okay, now running it, so training the models and building out these big amazing things. Yeah, you can, you might be able to get away with other stuff, but running those models and delivering them from, cloud provider to yourself, that you're going to want the best stuff. That's why Kimi K3 or Moonshot AI recommends the Blackwell 72 Blackwell array to run this device, but they didn't use it to create it because the creation of it doesn't need to be lightning fast, doesn't need to be super effective, doesn't need the end user to not get bored waiting. It needs and so that's why they recommend it that way. Um, so what migrates, what continues forward? So we looked at What's like ticking up in our model? Infrastructure volume. What's ticking down? Scarcity rents. So scarcity is becoming less of less of a moat there, or less of the thing that we thought was the big thing. Scarcity in different direction, of course, infrastructure volumes, scarcity. Um, what migrates forward? So what isn't changing? Server software, workflow state and data, distribution, permissions and verifications, integrated system. Sounds a lot like sysadmin. Sounds a lot like keeping the workflows in place. It sounds a lot like security, right? Um, which is a lot more like running these, keeping the system safe, not letting your stuff out there, keeping it up and running, kind of the blocking and tackling of the space. So the controversial conclusion, AI boom can be real while the AI capital stack still breaks. So if you were to, rewind a month and what you thought the market was like, the AI boom was real, AI capital, like as long as the boom stays in place, we're going to make money. It's just kind of taught us that the AI boom can stay in place and you can still lose money investing here. So AI usage going up, GPU rents going down, power demand going up, debt staying the same. Incredible, underwhelming, and resolved. Okay, so what's the incredible part about this whole thing? A downloadable model now competes on frontier agent task, moonshot open kernels, communication software, and agent infrastructure. Okay, persistent training environment supports thousands of tool calls. This is all incredible. You can do this on your own device, in-house, without anybody else telling you you can or can't. Like, go ask it biological questions or nuclear questions or chemical questions, and it'll answer it without lecturing you. Go ask it like, hey, I this is my APOB blood work. It'll give you the answer. Whereas, Fable will be like, oh, sorry, you're talking about something that could be biological. You got to go back to Opus here. And you're just like, well, my cholesterol was this level, and just basic stuff and then they lecture you on it. So, underwhelming. It doesn't, K3 doesn't beat anything out there. It's as good as generally speaking, it's as good as everything else, if not a little bit less. It relatively slow and verbose. Independent hallucination measurements worsened. Kimi K2.6 apparently had less hallucination. API economics are competitive, not revolutionary. The only way I've actually tinkered with Kimi K3 is through API. I do not host this locally or remotely by any means. It's a custom license, not Apache or MIT. So you might want to, run it through your legal team and make sure your legal team is up to speed on it. Not just drop it into, ChatGPT and say, hey, what's this? It is a different license. So what's unresolved? Um, the real thought put and power on the recommended topology, cost per success, production, workflow, effective reasoning across the flow, full 1 million context, enterprise adoption outside Kimi products. Yeah, I don't know how many people are running Kimi on their in their company. Whether usage elasticity beats. Here we are. That's it. So let's take a look at, yeah, 2,850 downloads this past month, and it just released this morning. So um, that's how many downloads have happened. 5.7 thousand likes, 14.2. Here it is. You want it? Go to huggingface.co/moonshot AI/Kimi K3. And there it is. You can go and download it, use this model, um, have at it. So that's where we're at with this whole thing. Hope you learned something about Kimi K3. Hope you learned something about this whole space. That's all we got today. Love you guys. Bye.